The throne world of the Ziran Dominion was not built for mercy. Its skies burned crimson with volcanic storms, and its cities were jagged fortresses of living metal, pulsing as if the very planet was alive and cruel. At the center of this empire stood the Hall of Judgment, a cathedral-like chamber where the galaxies conquered were dragged to be displayed, shamed, or executed. On this day, the hall was filled with thousands of alien dignitaries, vassal lords and soldiers, each one eager to witness the latest humiliation. The great banners of crushed civilizations hung from the vaulted walls, the shattered crests of the Veri, the dissolved sigils of the Tarun, the claw-marked flags of the Crenshaw. Each banner was a reminder that no resistance to the Dominion had ever endured, and now it was humanity's turn to be broken. At the heart of the chamber sat King Koresh, the immortal tyrant. His throne was carved from obsidian, veined with rivers of liquid flame that cast his massive silhouette in shifting shadows. His armor gleamed like polished bone, his crown fused into the flesh of his skull. Koresh's presence was so heavy it seemed to bend the air itself, his very gaze a chain that demanded submission. Before him was dragged a prisoner, Commander Jarek Halden, once an officer of Earth's battered fleet. His wrists were shackled, his uniform torn, his body bruised from days of captivity. Yet when the guards forced him to kneel, he resisted, locking his legs until they struck him down with the butts of their rifles. Even then, he spat blood on the marble floor rather than bow his head. The hall erupted with laughter at his defiance. Koresh raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. His voice, when it came, was like thunder rolling over stone. "This one is not worthy of a clean death," the king declared. "No, I will show the galaxy what humanity truly is, fragile, weak, laughable. His end shall not come swiftly. His spirit will be ground into the dust, and every race will remember him as the image of his species. Pitiful." He turned his burning eyes to the figure standing beside his throne. General Shira, the Dominion's champion. She was taller than any human by 2 heads, her body encased in living armor, a shifting exoskeleton of molten black plates that rippled with alien energy. Her weapon, a spear forged from the heart of a collapsed star, rested across her shoulders. She had slain kings, shattered rebellions, and conquered empires. She had never once known defeat. The king's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Shira," he commanded, his voice carrying across the hall. "Humiliate the human. Make him bow. Make him beg. Strip from him the last shred of dignity, and let this day mark the end of his kind's defiance." The crowd erupted into cheers and jeers, some chanting her name, others mocking humanity. Alien nobles leaned forward eagerly, their jeweled faces twisted with anticipation. To them, this was not merely punishment, it was entertainment. The spectacle of dominance, the ritual of despair. Shira stepped down from the dais, her heavy boots striking sparks from the obsidian floor. Her armor flexed and pulsed like living fire, casting flickering light across the chamber. She towered over Jarek, her golden eyes burning as she looked down at him. "Bow, human," she growled, her voice low and resonant. "Spare yourself pain. Show them you are nothing, and perhaps I will leave you your life." Jarek lifted his head, blood still streaking his mouth, and met her gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only the cold determination of a soldier who had already seen his world burn. The silence stretched. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Every other species had broken before this hall. Every other champion of rebellion had eventually begged. That was how the ritual always went. But Jarek's lips curled into a thin smile. He forced his battered body upright, his chains rattling, and raised one bruised hand to point at Shira. "Your mistake," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "was letting me stand." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. No one had ever spoken to Shira in defiance, not within Koresh's hall, not under the shadow of his throne. The king's eyes narrowed. His smile faltered, replaced with something sharper. Interest. The moment was electric, like the silence before a storm. For the first time in centuries, the ritual did not follow its script. The galaxy remembered the Battle of Sirius Gate as a massacre. To humanity, it was the day hope almost died. The Sirius Gate itself was one of the great strategic wormholes of the galaxy, a swirling halo of light and gravity where fleets could leap across star systems. For months, the remnants of Earth's forces had fought desperately to hold it. Admiral Shu's carrier groups, Captain Hale's destroyer wings, and Commander Jarek's own task force had thrown everything they had into the defense. If the gate fell, the Dominion would pour through to the last cluster of human colonies, snuffing out their people in weeks. The sky above Sirius burned with the wreckage of that desperate stand. Human ships, sleek gray frigates, blocky carriers, jury-rigged mining barges turned into gunships, fought against Zeran dreadnoughts that blotted out stars. Each Zeran vessel was a cathedral of war, plated in organic metal that healed from wounds, bristling with weapons that fired streams of searing plasma. The first hour of the battle was chaos. Human missile volleys lit up the void, tearing through Zeran escorts. Pilots screamed over comms, their cockpits glowing with warning lights as they dove between colossal beams that split apart entire flotillas. The gate itself pulsed as ships detonated near its rim, the gravity tides scattering wreckage across light years. But the Dominion had numbers, and worse, patience. For every dreadnought that faltered, another advanced. Their formations were perfect, their weapons relentless, their commanders cold as machines. Humanity's fleet fought like wolves, striking with cunning and desperation. But one by one their ships winked out in fire. Jarek's destroyer, the Vanguard, held the line until its reactors bled sparks and its hull split open. He had evacuated survivors into escape pods, watching from the bridge as the rest of his task force was swallowed by Zeran fire. The screams over comms still echoed in his skull. By the battle's third hour, it was over. The gate belonged to the Dominion. Humanity's fleet was dust, its admirals dead or captured, its proud carriers reduced to drifting husks. Yet not all had perished. Scattered across hidden corners of the galaxy, pockets of humanity clung to survival. Asteroid colonies drilled deep into iron-rich rocks. Refugees hidden under the ice of barren moons. Smugglers' havens turned into military workshops. They had no homeworld anymore. Earth had burned long before, but they had the will to endure. The galaxy, however, did not care. To most alien races, humanity was a joke. Reckless upstarts who had dared to rise too fast, too soon, without the patience of older civilizations. Now, broken and scattered, they were seen as finished. Some laughed at their stubbornness. Others pitied them but offered nothing. Only King Koresh saw an opportunity. He understood symbols. The fall of Sirius Gate wasn't enough. Rebellion might still fester in dark corners if left unchecked. But if humanity, the youngest and most defiant of the races, could be dragged before the galaxy and made to kneel, then the message would be carved in stone. No one defies the Zeran Dominion. That was why Commander Jarek had been spared when others were executed. His capture had been deliberate, orchestrated. Koresh wanted him paraded, not destroyed. As Jarek sat in the Dominion's dungeons, he thought of the survivors scattered across the stars. He pictured the colony children, faces lit by flickering lamps as their parents told them not to fear. He thought of pilots who had burned out their engines for one last run, engineers who had died sealing airlocks so others might live. He thought of Earth, not the ruins, but the memory, the oceans and forests that no Zeran could ever truly erase. If he broke now, if he begged, if he bent, it would not just be his shame. It would be humanity's shame, carried across every broadcast in the galaxy. The scattered survivors would see it and believe their fight was over. The Dominion thought humiliation was stronger than annihilation. Jarek understood why. Hope was the one weapon the Dominion feared, and humanity, though beaten, had not lost it entirely. Not yet. So in the throne hall, when the king demanded his submission, Jarek clenched his jaw and refused. He carried not just his own life, but the lives of millions unseen, scattered like sparks across the dark. If he must die, he would not die crawling. For every wreck at Sirius Gate, For every lost soul drifting in the void, for every hidden survivor who still whispered Earth's name in the dark, Jarek would stand, and in that defiance, the seeds of rebellion began to stir. The Colosseum gates groaned open, and a tidal wave of noise rolled over the arena. The sound wasn't just from the tens of thousands of alien throats present, it was amplified and broadcast to countless worlds. The Dominion made sure its spectacles reached every corner of the galaxy. Today, all would see a human humbled. The arena was a scar carved into the planet itself. An open wound of black stone, its walls inscribed with runes that shimmered with heat. Fires burned in massive braziers. The sand underfoot wasn't truly sand. It was pulverized bone from countless victims who had fought and died here. The crowd, a sea of alien forms, scaled, furred, crystalline, leaned forward as one. Above them, the king watched from his crystalline throne, surrounded by his court of nobles. Koresh's smile was sharp and gleaming. This was his theater. The gong thundered, reverberating through stone and bone. General Shira stepped onto the arena floor, and the audience roared in recognition. Her armor was alive, plates of black metal fused with glowing tendrils of energy. It flexed as she moved, rippling like liquid fire. In her hands was the spear of Axor, a weapon that had ended rebellions by itself, its shaft humming with power, its tip burning brighter than the sun. Shira raised the weapon, and the Colosseum erupted with her name. She had slain titans, carved through whole battalions, executed champions of 10 species who once thought themselves unbreakable. She was the Dominion's executioner, undefeated, unchallenged. Then Jarek entered. No armor, no shields, no alien weapons. Just a blade of steel, a relic salvaged from the wreckage of humanity's fleets. It was scarred, its edge imperfect, its shine dulled. To the crowd, it was a joke. They howled with laughter. To bring such a primitive weapon against Shira was absurd, but Jarek's stride was steady. His eyes did not rise to the jeering crowd or the furious glare of the king. He looked only at his opponent. Shira planted her spear in the ground, towering over him. "Bow, human," she growled, her voice amplified by the arena. "Show them your weakness, and I may let you live." Jarek's lips barely twitched. "I don't bow!" The crowd screamed in outrage, in laughter, in shock. The gong struck again. The duel began. Shira moved first. Her spear blurred, a strike faster than lightning aimed to smash him into the sand. The impact cracked the ground, sending shards of stone flying. Dust billowed. But Jarek was not there. He rolled, came up on his feet, his blade flashing. The steel hissed against her armor, sparks spitting as it scored a line across her chest plate. The crowd gasped. One strike, and Shira's living armor bore a crack. It was small, but it was enough. Shira snarled, her pride wounded far deeper than her body. No opponent had ever marked her armor with something so crude. Her attacks came faster, a whirlwind of blinding sweeps and crushing thrusts. Each blow could have shattered bones, pulverized organs, split him in half. The arena floor erupted around them, shock waves throwing dust and fire into the air. But Jarek moved with precision. Humanity had never been the strongest, never the fastest, but they had learned to endure. He read her patterns, predicted the flow of her strikes, sidestepped where others would block, cut where others would hesitate. Each time his blade connected, the crack in her armor spread. Small lines, hair-thin fractures, widening with every deflection. The crowd's laughter shifted into uneasy murmurs. This wasn't part of the script. Shira roared, her voice shaking the arena, and unleashed her full strength. The living armor blazed crimson, jets of molten energy blasting from her back as she leapt high into the air. She came down like a meteor, spear first, the force shaking the ground as if the planet itself groaned beneath her fury. The shockwave knocked Jarek sprawling. Pain ripped through his body, but he forced himself to rise. Blood streaked his cheek. His chest burned from the impact. Still, he lifted the blade. Their eyes met. Hers were full of fury, disbelief, insult. His were cold, steady, unyielding. She lunged again. He ducked under the sweeping spear, closed the distance, and with one precise stroke, his blade carved across her shoulder. The crack tore wider. The armor screamed as if alive, flickering with unstable light. The arena froze in silence. For the first time, Shira bled. She staggered back, disbelief etched across her face. Her perfect record, her flawless image, her pride shattered by one human strike. The crowd did not laugh now. They whispered, they pointed, they muttered in disbelief. On 1,000 worlds, viewers leaned closer to their screens. Something impossible had just happened. Jarek stood tall in the dust, his blade leveled. He was not smiling. He was not gloating. His face was stone. "This isn't your arena anymore," he said quietly. Shira's hands tightened on her spear. The fight was no longer spectacle. It was survival. The air in the Colosseum shifted. It was no longer filled with the sound of mockery or cheer. It was heavy, uncertain, almost afraid. Shira, the unbreakable champion of the Dominion, bled in front of them. The crack along her living armor glowed like a wound, spreading with every labored breath. She pressed her palm to it as if to force it closed, but the alien plates only shrieked and writhed against her flesh. For the first time in centuries, her aura of invincibility had been torn open. Jarek didn't press the attack immediately. He stood still in the dust and smoke, blade lowered, chest heaving. He wanted her to see it. He wanted the galaxy to see it, that even a titan could falter. From the stands, silence gave way to something strange. The first voice was faint, barely audible. Humanity. It was a whisper from one of the enslaved humans forced to serve as attendants in the royal box. Then another picked it up, louder, in the lower tiers. Humanity! Humanity! Within moments, the chant spread like fire. The sound grew until it drowned the rustle of alien murmurs. The slaves shouted it with desperate, breaking voices, and shockingly, others joined them. Species long cowed by the Dominion hesitated, then added their own throats to the cry. The crowd of thousands thundered a name meant to be forgotten. Shira's lips curled into a snarl. She was not just fighting a human anymore, she was fighting the unraveling of fear itself. Her spear blazed, casting arcs of molten light as she swung in furious combinations, faster and wilder than before. The ground split, the air rippled with heat. Jarek was driven back, his boots sliding through sand and bone dust. Each impact shook his bones, sent sparks racing up his arm, made the blade quiver. But he endured. He gave ground, yes, but with every backward step, he drew her deeper into desperation. She was no longer fighting with precision. She was fighting with wounded pride. And wounded pride was predictable. Jarek's blade snapped out again, striking her forearm. The armor there split wide, spraying molten fragments. Shira roared, her golden eyes blazing with disbelief. The chant grew louder. In the stands, Zyran guards shouted for silence, striking down anyone who dared to cry the human name. But it was too late. The sound rolled like a storm, shaking the arena, echoing through the broadcast feeds. Entire star systems were hearing it live. Slaves who had never dared speak above a whisper now shouted with all their lungs. The king leaned forward on his throne, his expression darkening. This was not the spectacle he had planned. His perfect order, his ritual humiliation, it was slipping into chaos before his very eyes. Jarek felt it. Every beat of the chant fueled him. His arm ached, his ribs burned from earlier impacts, his vision swam, but he straightened his back. This was no longer just survival. This was a declaration. "Look at them," he shouted, voice cracking but unbroken, pointing his blade toward the roaring crowd. "They're not chanting for you. They're not bowing to your king. They remember what freedom feels like." Shira bared her teeth and lunged again, but her strikes had lost the weight of certainty. Jarek slipped past her thrust, dragging his blade along her flank. Another crack screamed open across her armor, spilling fire and light. The audience gasped. The chant surged like thunder. On distant worlds, viewers who had mocked humans now leaned forward in awe. Rebellions that had been whispers now saw a vision of possibility. For the first time, the Dominion looked fallible. Jarek's chest heaved, sweat and blood streaking his face. His legs trembled, his blade's edge was chipped and battered, but his spirit towered above the arena. He had not come here to win a duel. He had come here to make the impossible visible. The king's fingers tightened around the armrest of his throne. His voice rumbled through the hall, furious, sharp. "This ends now!" His words cut through the chant like a blade. Guards in black armor surged from the Colosseum gates, weapons charged, marching to surround the arena floor. Shira staggered, her pride in tatters, her once flawless form marked with scars. The chants, the cracks in her armor, the trembling in her hands, everything she had built her legend on was crumbling, and above it all, one truth was clear. With every strike, Jarek was no longer just fighting her. He was fighting the Dominion itself. The rebellion had already begun. The king's command still echoed through the Colosseum when Shira let out a roar that shook the walls. Her humiliation burned hotter than any wound. The cracks in her armor pulsed like open veins, bleeding molten light. With a guttural snarl, she called upon the full wrath of her living shell. The plates along her body split and unfolded, releasing torrents of crimson fire. Her silhouette expanded, doubling in bulk as the armor fused tighter with her flesh. It wasn't just armor anymore, it was consuming her, turning her into something monstrous. Her spear blazed like a miniature star, the heat alone searing the sand black. The crowd erupted in frenzy. Fear, awe, and bloodlust tangled into a storm of screams. Guards kept pouring in from the gates, weapons raised, forming a ring around the arena to ensure Jarek's death was final. Jarek tightened his grip on the steel blade. His lungs burned, his side throbbed where Shira's spear had grazed him earlier, and his arms trembled from fatigue. He had already gone beyond his limits. But retreat was not an option. He could feel the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes, slaves, rebels, survivors, watching him through the broadcast. He could not falter. Shira charged. Her spear struck with enough force to fracture the ground in molten lines. Jarek rolled aside, the heat licking his back like a furnace. He came up on one knee and slashed upward, the blade shrieking across her thigh. Another crack bloomed in her armor, spraying molten shards. She didn't even flinch. Her next swing hammered him square in the chest. The impact hurled Jarek across the arena. He crashed into the sand, skidding through bone fragments. The crowd gasped, certain it was over. His body screamed in agony, every rib feeling as though it might snap. His vision flickered. For a moment, darkness clawed at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself up. One knee, then the other. He spat blood, lifted the battered blade, and dragged himself back to his feet. "This isn't about me," he rasped. The words weren't for Shira. They were for the galaxy. Shira's golden eyes flared in fury. She spun her spear in a blazing arc, the weapon trailing fire like a comet. She descended on him with killing intent, every strike a storm meant to crush his existence. Jarek did not back down. He stepped into the storm. Their weapons clashed, sparks spraying, the shriek of metal against alien alloy ringing like thunder. His blade quivered under the force, but he kept pressing. Every block rattled his bones, every dodge tore at his breath, yet his eyes stayed locked on hers. He wasn't looking for survival. He was looking for the opening. It came in the chaos. A half beat where her spear overextended, the weight dragging it slightly wide. It was a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Jarek roared and drove forward, his blade igniting with the raw will that burned in his veins. Not magic, not alien technology, just the unbreakable fire of a human refusing to bow. Steel met living armor. The blade pierced deep into her chest plate. The armor screamed, a living howl of agony. It split wide, molten light bursting like blood. Shira staggered, eyes widening in disbelief as her body betrayed her. Her spear dropped from trembling hands, clattering against the stone. For the first time in her reign of victory, she fell to her knees. The Colosseum froze. Silence fell heavy as a tomb. The guards hesitated. The crowd stopped breathing. Across the galaxy, billions of eyes stared in stunned disbelief. A human had felled the undefeated champion of the Dominion. Shira's voice broke the silence, ragged, low, but undeniable. "I yield." The word struck harder than any blade. The champion who had made kings beg for mercy now bent before a human. The Colosseum exploded into chaos. Slaves screamed in joy, chains rattling as they tore free in wild defiance. Rebellions across distant systems sparked to life at that very moment, as if her surrender had unlocked something buried in every oppressed throat. The king stood on his throne, fury blazing. "Kill him now!" Guards raised their rifles, the hum of charged plasma filling the air. But the damage was already done. Even if Jarek died in the next instant, he had carved a truth into the fabric of the galaxy. The Dominion could bleed. Its pride could break. Jarek, battered and broken, lifted his blade again, ready to face the storm. He might not walk out of this arena, but his people would never crawl again. The chains had already begun to fall. The order to kill Jarek thundered from the king's throne, but it was already too late for his command to hold sway. The arena was no longer his domain. The moment Shira dropped her spear and whispered, "I yield," the Dominion's greatest weapon had bent the knee to a human. That single act ripped through the galaxy faster than any fleet. The soldiers who raised their rifles faltered. Their sights wavered, fingers trembling on the triggers. For years they had obeyed without hesitation, but now doubt gnawed at them. If the unbreakable champion could fall, if a human could defy destiny and survive, then perhaps the Dominion wasn't as eternal as they had been told. The first rifle lowered. Then another. Within seconds, hesitation spread like wildfire through the guard ranks. Jarek stood bloody and swaying, his chest heaving, blade hanging at his side. He should have collapsed. Every nerve screamed for him to give in, but he didn't. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes blazing with defiance, the embodiment of resistance itself. That sight froze the Colosseum in awe, and then the world outside the walls caught fire. Slave pens erupted as captives stormed free, emboldened by the spectacle broadcast across every system. Shackled miners on frozen moons dropped their tools and struck their overseers. Fields burned as farmers rose with scythes and old rifles. Outlaw fleets that had once hidden in the void ignited their thrusters and painted rebellion across the stars. The Dominion had ruled for millennia with fear, but fear had shifted. No longer did the people fear the king. They feared missing the chance to strike while the chains were cracking. Back in the arena, chaos broke loose. The king's enforcers surged forward, blades drawn, but Shira moved before Jarek could raise his weapon. She staggered upright, blood and molten light dripping from her shattered armor, and stood between Jarek and the guards. Her voice carried over the screams, "Enough!" The guards hesitated. Some backed away, unwilling to raise weapons against their own champion. Others turned their blades not on Jarek, but on the throne itself. The king's command fractured into a storm of confusion, betrayal, and defection. From his dais, the king bellowed in fury, his jeweled crown glinting in the firelight. But no words could hold back the tide. His power was unraveling, thread by thread, undone by a single duel. Jarek staggered to Shira's side. She looked at him with a strange expression, half hatred, half admiration, but entirely respect. Her yield had not been weakness. It had been recognition. She had lived her life as a weapon, but now, for the first time, she chose her allegiance. "Stand," she said, gripping his arm to keep him upright. "If you fall now, the fire dies with you." Jarek forced his spine straight. Blood poured down his face, but he lifted his blade toward the throne. The symbol was undeniable. Across the galaxy, billions of screens captured the moment. A human warrior, crowned not with gold, but with defiance, standing against a throne that had ruled unchallenged for ages. The Colosseum exploded with rebellion. Chains were ripped from walls, weapons seized, soldiers defecting in droves. Fires lit the sky above the city as riots consumed the streets. The Dominion's heart world, once the fortress of unyielding control, was being torn apart from within. The king fled, his royal guard dragging him through hidden passages as the Colosseum fell to the mob. His throne, the seat of terror for generations, was swallowed in flames, and at the center of it all stood Jarek, bloodied but unbroken, blade raised to the heavens. The broadcast spread like a plague of hope. Worlds that had been silent under centuries of domination roared alive. Rebellion banners rose from orbital stations, space yards, and desert strongholds. Entire fleets broke formation, turning their guns not against rebels but against Dominion flagships. The Empire was no longer infinite. It was mortal. and mortals could be slain. Shira remained by Jarek's side. She was no longer the Dominion's champion. She was something else, proof that even the mightiest weapon of the Empire could turn. Her shattered armor, still glowing faintly, became a symbol in itself. Across the galaxy, rebels painted their faces with molten streaks to mimic her cracks, a sign that no armor was unbreakable. Jarek did not ask for a crown. He never spoke of rulership. But the galaxy began to whisper his name as if it were already written into destiny. Not as king, not as conqueror, but as the spark that lit the fire. He had walked into the Colosseum a prisoner. He left it a legend. The Dominion would never recover, and somewhere in the void, in every corner where chains had rattled for centuries, the same words echoed from throat to throat, spreading faster than any fleet. If a human can break the unbreakable, then we can break our masters. The galaxy had turned. The war for freedom had begun.